crazy. Good afternoon and welcome to the regular Belton City Council meeting for Tuesday, June 4th, 2022. We're glad to see everybody here tonight. Appreciate your attendance. Tonight, the Pledge of Allegiance to the United States flag will be led by Councilmember Stephanie O'Banion. The pledge to the Texas flag will be led by City Manager Sam Listy, and I will be giving the invocation.
Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. On the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Please join me as I pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us here tonight. Thank you for the opportunity to live in this city. Thank you for these council members who are willing to take their time and their effort and put their heart into making the city a better place. We appreciate all of our city staff. We especially ask you to keep your hand over our first responders and certainly our military personnel. We ask that you help us to find peace in the world. Also like to remember the family of former council member Bill Stanford, who passed away this week. Mr. Stanford served the council for many years, and we appreciate his service, and keep his family in your loving arms. Help us and guide us. Help us to make good decisions as we deliberate tonight, and forgive us when we fail thee. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Call this meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is public comments. We have 3 tonight, but we'll save 2 of those for speak to a particular item. Citizens who wish to address the council on any matter may register to do so prior to the meeting and speak during this item. Forms are always located on the outside south entry to the room. At this time, I think Mr. Randy Pittenger was the first person to, maybe not the first, but certainly he's enthusiastic.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I actually came to talk about the 4th of July, but before I do, just a brief, I want you to know how much fun it has been to encourage our local businesses to apply for the small business grant. What a joy. I know that's not on the agenda yet, a little early, but what fun we had sharing that application with our local businesses, and their eyes light up and they get excited and say, how do I do this? And say, it's easy. You can fill this out, and really a great thing. I want to commend you again and thank you for investing in our community and our business community. It's really well received. And of course, the food and nutrition grants also a wonderful thing for our community. So thank you on behalf of the chamber and businesses. Now I'm here for the 4th of July. I've passed out, shared some of the schedule of events, calendar events. There's some actually out on the table also. It's an exciting time of year, always in Belton, but I didn't want to miss the opportunity to say how important, how appreciative we are as a chamber to the city for the partnership. Most of you know, some more than others, how much detail, how many people involved, how much planning goes into pulling off the 4th of July in Belton. It's a big deal. For those of us who enjoyed it for many decades prior to being an insider, I'm continually overwhelmed by the amount of time and energy and detail, attention. Thank you on behalf of our community and certainly the chamber for the city's investment. You know, it is a big, big day, the 4th of July, for police, fire, public works, parks, and all of city staff. It's a big work day. But that makes this the place to be in Central Texas, and people come from far and wide to enjoy our city. We also have the downtown street party coming up, which will bring thousands of people to Belton to celebrate our community and our wonderful downtown. We're excited about that. So thank you on behalf of the chamber for that. Just a reminder, our theme this year is celebrating community connections, and there's among the items leading to that theme was the hike and bike trail extension, adding Southeast Belton connected back to the hike and bike trail, and all the things, the generational kinds of things we have. What I think I'm gonna go ahead and say this, even though I'm not supposed to publicly announce this yet, but our Grand Marshal is the Long family. What a great representation of the community connections we have here. You'll hear more about that and all with our our formal press release coming up soon. But I also wanted to say thank you for those of you planning already to participate in the parade. Those we haven't heard from, I hope we will hear from you soon. Deadline for parade entries is Monday, so picked up one more tonight. So we want to have that. But I also wanted to present and remind you that one of our honorees at the parade this year is our Beltonian of the year. For 2021, Dan and Kenny Kirkley were our Beltonian. They will be featured in the parade. And so I've got their magnets. And I'm going to give those to them.
Thank you, sir. We are honored to get to be there, and it's Belton. Belton is my favorite place in the whole world.
No better place. And a great representative of our community and servant leadership. Thank you all again. On behalf of the chamber, thank you to the council and the city staff for partnership. What a great opportunity for our community to shine and show our community partnership. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Randy. I knew you're going to be enthusiastic. I knew I could count on that. And certainly agree. Anybody who's ever been part of the parade or been part of the planning for the parade knows it's a much more complicated operation than it looks like when you're standing on the street corner during the parade. So we appreciate the chamber very much and everything that goes into making this a success. And I appreciate you mentioning the business grants as well as the grants we made to nonprofits last week. It was a fantastic week to be able to go out and hand out some checks to some people who are serving people within the community. It makes you appreciate the job when you get to do those sorts of things. So again, we appreciate it. Items 3 and 4 are under consent agenda, and items under this section are considered to be routine by the council and may be enacted by one motion. If discussion is desired by the council, any item may be removed from the consent agenda prior to voting at the request of any council member, and it will be considered separately. Item 3, to consider the minutes of previous meetings of May 23rd, 2022, a special call city council meeting, and item also May 24th, 2022, the regular city council meeting. Item 4, to consider reappointments to the following boards and commission: the Parks Board, Josh Pearson, and Oscar Bosoza. And as always, we appreciate people being willing to serve, and that certainly goes for those two folks on the Zoning and Board of Adjustments, Matt Nagel and Nelson Hutchison. Anybody wish to discuss those?
I move we approve items on the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Item number 5, planning and zoning issue. To hold a public hearing and consider a zoning change from agricultural A to single family 3 SF3 residential district on approximately 97.413 acres located at 1000 East Avenue H, generally east of Interstate 35 on the north side of East Avenue H and south of Nolan Creek, typically referred to as Griggs Hill. Tina Moore.
Hi, sorry. Next one. Sorry, we're getting the presentation together. Thank you. All right, sorry about that. All right, this property that is under consideration is located just east of I-35. Here is East Avenue H, and it is just on the north side of that, and just off of the Nolan Creek. Here's a zoomed in look at the property. As you can see, that property is currently developed with one detached home. The zoning for this property is zone agricultural. Surrounding zoning to the north is zone agricultural, commercial highway, and commercial 2 for commercial developments. To the south is multifamily for an apartment complex, Bell Oaks apartment complex. And to the west is single family 2 developments, and also some commercial highway zoning for where the church is. To the east is again some agricultural and some heavy industrial zoning districts. The applicant is proposing to zone this property to single family 3 for a detached single family home residential subdivision. The conceptual plan proposes 224 detached homes. Proposal shows a single public street for access onto this lot, and that is through East Avenue H and an emergency access via Shady Lane. So here is a conceptual site plan. This is the public street into the subdivision. There is an emergency access just to the east of the subdivision that connects to Shady Lane. And then on to Holland is what is proposed. There is a conceptual plan for connection through a proposed Central Avenue Spring Avenue Bridge that the city is proposing on the north side. The proposed zoning would allow for detached single-family homes. Area requirements for single-family 3 is a minimum of 5,000 square feet, 50 feet wide lot with a depth of 90. What's being proposed is approximately 6,000 square feet with a width of 50 and a depth of 120. For the site, the city requested a TIA be done. Again, that's part of our subdivision code that requires any proposed subdivision that exceed 1,000 traffic count per day to provide that. The applicant provided that for us. It is currently under review, it has not been accepted yet. There are some further clarification that needs to be made. On the conceptual site plan, it does not address our thoroughfare plan requirements, nor does it meet our subdivision ordinance. For our subdivision ordinance, we require a minimum of 3 access for any subdivision that exceeds 101 lots. Here is a look at our thoroughfare plan amendment. As you can see, the proposed Elm Grove Road runs just along the eastern boundary of this property. Staff has talked to the applicant about multiple other points of access. The first being, of course, East Avenue H. A second, an extension of the Elm Grove Road connection that needs to be a public road, not a private emergency access road. A third is the street extension to Shady Lane to Holland. And again, we're looking for a public road that the community can use to get in and out of there for circulation. The developer has acknowledged these developments. I apologize, I forgot one. The other one is, of course, the city proposed connection from Spring Avenue or that bridge that is under consideration for grant. The developer has acknowledged these other alternative and they will be addressed with the subdivision review process as part of that. The future land use map identifies this area for residential developments. So the rezoning appears to be compatible with our comprehensive plan. Notices were sent out to property owners within 200 feet of the property. We did receive one letter from the applicant, Mr. Griggs, for approval of the application. With that, the Planning and Zoning Commission heard this item at their meeting on March 15th and recommended approval of the zoning change. Staff concurs with the recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Commission with recognition that the subdivision requirements and thoroughfare plan map must be provided in the subdivision plat for review. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have, and I just want to point out the applicant is here and would also like to make a presentation.
Thank you, Tina. At this time, we'll open the public hearing, and Mr. Clarence Griggs, the property owner, and Mr. Mike Avera have both signed up to speak to the issue.
We've got our engineer here. We want to talk about the TIA, and I'll talk about some of the entrances. That's all right.
Please state your name and address for the record, please, sir. We try to limit our speeches, our comments to 3 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Nicholas Kale. I'm with Bowman Civil Engineering firm in Austin, Texas, 1120 South Capitol Texas Highway. I just wanted to state for the record that we are in the process of working with city staff to meet all the city ordinances for the 3 points of connection. And we're going to work with city staff to make sure that it meets all the code requirements. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Council, thank y'all very much. We've done a lot of work since our last meeting here.
I'm sorry, Clarence, would you, we know who you are, but would
I
you
am
state your
Clarence
name and
Griggs.
address for the record?
Clarence Griggs, owner of the property. Mr. oh, I'm sorry, 2214 Westlake Drive, Austin, Texas, 78746.
Thank
Mr. Rivera and his group have been doing a lot of work since our last meeting to address some of the concerns, particularly about the three entrances. In the TIA review that Lee Engineering did on our proposal, one of the points they showed or as a possible relief would be using Carla K and Mulehouse Street as a possible second entrance, which, certainly I'm sure there's some concerns that it's the same access point as Avenue H, but it does take some of the traffic off of just one entrance to the interstate there. The other thing that has developed since then is Mr. Rivera has put under contract the Mon property, which are the 4 tracks right at the top of Avenue H to the north. And we've also been, and I'll let him address it a little more, but he's been talking to the people at Crossroads Church, and we feel like we might be able to do an entrance from Crossroads that would give them access to a neighborhood, which I think they're very excited about, having more of a neighborhood feel to their property that go along with the expansion that they're going to be planning. The other deal, which, the bridge. I mean, everybody's concerned about the bridge down on Nolan Creek. I've located a builder, and this is just one model of the bridge they use. It can be, it has to be a maximum of 89 feet. He actually came to Belton, did a review of the creek and found that he feels like the 89 feet would span it. Of course, we'd have to have structure on either side of the creek to tie it into, but would be able to do that without having any kind of obstruction in the middle of the creek, and eventually be able to take out that low water dam that's been causing a lot of the problems, flooding problems downtown. We can make this bridge as wide as we want. The width is typically 8.5 or 8.6 feet up to 9.6 feet, maybe even 10, depending on the different structures that he can build there. But we can make this a double wide, we can make it triple wide, maybe even 4. And his estimates, we could probably do the largest one for less than $500,000, considerably less than the $6.5 million that the grant has been issued for. We know that y'all are also looking at the total thoroughfare plan where you extend Elm Grove Road. I think, in my opinion, it'd be much wiser to spend a large amount of money on a larger bridge to cross Nolan Creek, where you've got a direct access over to Highway 93. If you're going to do that, and nothing's guaranteed on getting that grant to start with. We're not counting on that as part of our plan. If it were eventually built, we could utilize it. But at this point, we think that building this less expensive bridge across Nolan Creek would give us access to the central business district, do a hike and back extension, just really make it. And we will have a park at the lower end of our property where there is some flood plain there. But other than that, we feel like we've met all the requirements of showing where we could get to 3 access points, and ask that you can go ahead and approve the planning and zoning change so we can move forward with the total project.
Thank you, Mr. Hicks.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Any questions? Can we ask?
Maybe.
I think Just gonna let Mr. Rivera come up and
Can we get my slides up?
Yes, please.
Mike Avera, applicant, 1000 East Avenue H. So as stated, March 15th, we came before P and Z. They unanimously approved the zoning change. March 22nd, we came before the council and they tabled it for reasons of access. At this point, I am 100% confident we're going to get access. 3, I get 4, I could probably get more than that. And I'll show this. This right here is the conceptual. Yeah, good. This is the conceptual for the property right here. And I've got to talk fast since I've only got 3+ minutes. That's 224 units right there. So with 224 units, we need 3 access points here. There was a misconception from the council meeting on the 22nd that this was going to be a much denser project. The first time we proposed this, we did propose a denser project, 550. After meeting with most of y'all, though, y'all wanted that toned down a bit. So we came in at this 224. Next slide, please, Tina. Thanks. So we have done the TIA on the East Avenue H, and that East Avenue H is when we have this at full build out, 6 years down the road, factoring in growth, East Avenue H is only at 21% capacity. So East Avenue H in and of itself will meet the needs of the development at full build out. Next slide, please. With Lee Engineering, which is a third-party engineering group for the city, they came back and said, why haven't y'all considered Carla K and Mule House? So taking that, we are now proposing that as another access. As Clarence pointed out, it's problematic there, and I'm sure the city's going to agree with this. The one point right there coming into the development. However, if we buy Boulevard, the entrance in that particular connection to those 2 roads, it would mitigate any emergency issues that we may have, and that would create 2 separate accesses, if you will, to the property on that side. Next one, please. This one right here is the north access. And on the north access, that's the East Central, East Spring. Obviously, that's got the low water crossing right there. It's not ideal for our development, but as we understand in the last few months, grass fire happened over at the Ransburg property and a fire truck did get across that thing. It's not ideal. It's on everyone's agenda to get that thing replaced. And we are willing and wanting to participate in the replacement of that bridge. As Clarence stated, $6.5 million for that particular bridge. We think that might be a better use to connect that with a thoroughfare plan over on 93 with the Elm Grove extension. Another comment that was made by council on the 22nd of March was that, oh, well, it's going to take y'all a while to get the right of way for this. Can you go to the next slide, please? And I raised my hand. I wasn't allowed to speak, but the city owns all the property that is highlighted in purple. And there is already right of way there for streets. So the city owns all the property in order to execute a reconfiguration of a new bridge, which, as I understand it, and would make the most sense, is to come right across East Spring Street there and hop over the creek at that point right there. Both sides are owned by the city, so I can't imagine getting that bridge replaced is going to be a problem with right of way for us. So that we're proposing is our third access. Next slide, please. That's the Mon property acquisition. There's 4 pieces there. If you can go to the next one, please. That is abandoned East Avenue F, part of the original subdivision here. I have spoken many times with the church and with the board of the church. We walked that property right there. The church is planning an expansion in the very near future that is going to make this roadway possible if we need it. Can we go to the next one? And this right here culminates in all the different possibilities that we have for connection. One thing I would like to clarify is the thoroughfare plan, that red line that we have coming to the south of the property that's next to Bell Oaks. Actually, we would be emphatically against any open road that connects us with Bell Oaks. For as I'm sure y'all can all imagine, for all the reasons, the 1,000 reasons that y'all had last year with the police being called out there, the murder you had in July out there, and we don't want our subdivision connected to that. These homes are going to be priced $375 up. So what we would propose right there is a utility there, and there's a right of way. What we would propose is a utility easement. What we would propose is a right of way with a Knox box connecting to our property in the event of emergency only. We have been in contact with Bell Oaks, and actually just yesterday we communicated with them. We're trying to acquire that right of way for an emergency access. There's an 8-foot fence that we have proposed to go along the whole property line at that Knox box. We'd hope that would be an 8-foot fence again. We have also made an offer to Bell Oaks to buy the property. We'll see where that goes with that. So
Can you sum it up for us, please, sir, so we can move to discuss it?
Yep. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 possible exits right now. The one thing I would like to clarify that Ms. Moore said was the thoroughfare plan. Thoroughfare plan is coming along that very east edge of the property, along with the Charpings who are here. And so, we're not planning on that as a connection. We are willing to provide a right of way that at some point in time, whenever that thoroughfare gets completed, that they could connect into our subdivision, but it's not something we're planning on. With that, I think that the timing is right for the city to begin talking to the property owners about the thoroughfare. You've got a couple that has just bought their property. They're planning some upgrades on their house there. I think they need to be communicated with. The Charpings have.
Yes, sir. We need to move forward.
Yeah. So basically, I'm asking for the council to approve the rezone.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak at the public hearing? If not, we will close the public hearing and the council will consider the proposition. Questions or comments from council?
I think, because it requires at least 3 for the size, and you guys have come with a plausible opportunity to find those 3. This is a zoning, it's not a plat. So I don't see anything here that would stand in the way from the zoning, but understanding that before we approve the plat, that those would have to be moved from potential to actual. And so that's my comment.
I appreciate the reduced size of the development from the 570 to 264, whatever that number is. I think that assists with traffic flow and access and development and less density. I think helps others who are concerned about it as well.
I think it's a very, very good addition to our community and some of the goals that we have. And in light of that, I would make a motion that we approve agenda item 5 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and multiple seconds. All those in favor of zoning change, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes 6-1. Thank you all for coming. Item number 6, to hold a public hearing and consider an ordinance on second reading granting commercial solid waste collection franchise to Paramount Wastewater Solutions Limited. And Ms. Casey's going to present that.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We received a request from Paramount Wastewater Solutions requesting a commercial franchise for solid waste, basically roll-off containers. They sent in some information telling us that their 4 areas of focus were septic pumping, grease trap services, specialty wastewater, and roll-off dumpster services. Commercial solid waste rates are market driven. We currently have 6 franchises out there. But because they are market driven, they will take care of themselves. So adding a 7th is not going to be detrimental to anyone. Excuse me. It requires 2 readings and a public hearing per charter. And we've made all the franchises coterminous in January of 2030. So all 7 of them would end at the same time or be up for renewal at the same time. So we recommend that you hold the public hearing and adopt the ordinance granting the franchise on second and final reading.
Thank you very much. This time we'll open the public hearing. Does anyone wish to speak on this ordinance? Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing and open up for council consideration.
I make a motion that we adopt the ordinance on second reading granting commercial solid waste to Paramount Wastewater Solutions.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt the ordinance. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Item 7 is to consider authorizing the city manager to execute a construction contract for the Northeast Street Water Improvements Project, CDBG project number 7220021, and any change orders associated with the contract not to exceed the amount authorized under state law. Mr. Bates.
Mayor, Council, appreciate getting to present to you tonight. Exciting news, another project kicking off the ground. We just had the 6th Avenue Water Line kickoff. Heritage Park is currently being advertised right now. So a lot of positive news. This you may be familiar with. This was part of that 2018 street and utilities plan that was done, and we're kind of broken up into several sections. I'm gonna cover this real quick. This is around by the Methodist Church there on 2nd Avenue. It goes north up to 5th Avenue towards where Planet Fitness is and around. The project consists of a brand new water line that's replacing the existing 8-inch, but multi-material line, as best I could probably call it. It's a cast iron, transite. It just kind of, it's, yes. Yeah. There we go. So we want to make sure that we get those out and we get brand new connections to those residents. So that's the water line, new fire hydrants. And then as a final added bonus to the project, we will come back and mill and overlay that street so that those residents can have a brand new street at their disposal there. So we took this to bid. We had received these bids come in. The OPC was about $550. So remember the date that I'm bringing you a project that was under an OPC with today's climate. So TTG Utilities, they came in the low bid with $539,004. They are out of Gatesville. We've worked with TTG quite a bit, so we feel very comfortable with them as a contractor. Their most recent project was the shared use path that Randy touched on, the connection piece, and you all are all familiar with that going forward. One of the things I want to let you know of from the funding aspect, we did get a CBDG grant for this. This was awarded in about 2020, I believe, and worked through. So $275,000 of this project is reimbursable through that program because many of the residents and homes along that street are qualify for that reimbursement. So that is a bonus to the city. And then you'll see that Mike and Sam generously allocated the capital funds this year. So we've got funds to meet that need going forward. And then that's our recommendation, that we move forward with authorizing TTG the award of the bid, and then we'll get to work on this project ASAP. Any questions?
Questions or comments from the council?
I move we authorize the city manager to execute the contract for Northeast Street Water Improvement Project.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to authorize the city manager to enter into a professional services contract with KPA Engineers. All those in favor?
One before, yeah, that one's coming up.
All right, sorry.
No, you're okay.
I got ahead of you. Pardon me. Consider authorizing the city manager to execute a construction contract for the Northeast Street Water Improvements Project, CDBG project, as I've read. We have a motion and a second for that.
So move.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Sorry for getting ahead of myself.
And then to your item, Mayor.
Trying to get you through early.
Yes, sir, it's fine.
All right. Consider authorizing the city manager to enter a professional services agreement with KPA for the East Street Water Improvements Project, CDBG Project 7220021.
Absolutely. Yes, sir. So this is a standard for us to enter into this agreement, just amend our professional services agreement with KPA. They designed the project. We're of course comfortable with them working with the contractor, answering any questions and processing pay estimates and record drawings.
I don't have, do you have questions? I don't have any questions. I move that we approve item number 8, consider authorizing city manager to enter into a professional services agreement with KPA Engineers for construction.
We have a motion and a second to authorize the city manager to enter into professional services agreement. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Matt. Item 9 is to consider a resolution authorizing the execution and delivery of addendum number 4 to the amended and restated water supply contract with Bell County Water Control and Improvement District Number 1 in connection with the issuance of the district's water system revenue bond series 2022 concerning Belton's cost share and standby power generation project at the water plant in the approximate amount of $2 million plus interest. Mr. Malisti.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Of course, this is an item that's been in the news quite a bit lately with the power outage at the plant. And so Ricky and his folks at the plant is here. Appreciate you being here, Ricky. Certainly have been working on this since the earlier outage and had engineering plans prepared and ready to go. And with the most recent outage, took the item to the board and got their approval to proceed with providing standby power generation at the plant. Of course, y'all well know that the district provides water to us through a water supply contract. We've had a number of amendments in recent times. You'll be hearing a little bit more about that. And in the water budget and the water and sewer rate study that is coming forward to you again tonight. In 2020, the council and BCWCID number 1 agreed on a project to upgrade the transmission system to achieve the contractual daily amount of 10 million gallons a day. That was authorized by the council with the issuance of agreement to pay the debt service for that through the district in the amount of $6.7 million. Earlier this year in April, we agreed on a project to increase the water treatment capacity at the plant to 4 MGDs in an amount not to exceed $22 million. Pretty substantial project there that is in the planning right now. The item before you tonight is addendum number 4, which would authorize our share in backup electric power generation at the plant. The total cost for that project is a little over $12 million. We're very hopeful that a state DAG grant will be available and approved for our area in the amount of $5 million. We've competed successfully for the DAG grants in the past through Heart of Texas Defense Alliance. And this is very promising because of the service that this facility would provide to Fort Hood. Assuming, hopefully, the approval of that grant would leave $7.4 million in funding and about a $2 million cost for us plus interest. Ricky's about to get that project underway for bidding. As I mentioned, the design is already done. They will go ahead with that prior to a grant decision. We probably won't get a grant decision until late this year. And so we are budgeting $120,000 in debt service annually. We have worked in some language into the agreement with the district that if the grant's approved, our proportionate share would be reduced. There's also a provision in the bond to redeem any outstanding debts if it is approved. We've all experienced significant impacts from the loss of power. As you can see there, certainly some benefits of this project would be the opportunity to avoid premature implementation of the drought contingency plan that affects us all. We've had a number of business disruptions, as I'm sure you're well aware of. Those are those high water users. Boil water notices have become a little bit more common with this kind of a situation. And then, of course, when we are having to curtail usage, we're not able to sell the water as well. A lot of customer frustration, as you can imagine. Another item, which is an advantage, is that with the project, the district will may also be able to participate in load reduction programs by ERCOT and Encore. And there's some incentives there for that opportunity to the tune of $500,000 to $750,000 in potential water rate reductions in the future. So all positives. Obviously, that comes with a cost, but certainly to have the opportunity to have the water and to be able to deliver the water, it's certainly important to have backup generation. So the impact to us, as I mentioned, about $120,000 a year, and would recommend your approval of the resolution. And again, Ricky Garrett is here from the district in case you have any questions of him.
Thank you, Mr. Listy. Questions or comment by council?
Sam, I thought I read somewhere that with the ERCOT program that we're doing, that there was potential for 4 cents off per thousand
Yes,
somewhere.
yes,
Is that
yes.
the 500 to 750, or is that in addition to?
Ricky? Yes, that's that amount, the 500 to 750.
Our share of that would be,
That's
like
total, that's
13%?
district wide, I would believe.
so we
That's-
get 13% of the, whatever that refund was?
You would get the 4 to 5 cents per thousand. It would be on the O&M rate.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Any idea what kind of financial impact that have for city, 4 cents off per thousand?
It's a little hard to say right now, Mike. I don't know if we have any.
It'd be interesting to
any
know
idea.
how that offset the 120. Whatever we can do to
Sure.
secure that. I
We'll
think
be
should work
monitoring
out.
that very, very closely to try to see if we can take full advantage of that.
We got a lot of water and sewer
We do.
items on the
We
plate.
understand. We understand.
Lot.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Listy? Mr. Garrett, we appreciate you being here with us tonight as a resource. Thank you very much for what y'all are doing. I know it's been a difficult year. I'd entertain a motion.
Will we approve item 9 as presented?
Second.
All those in favor of approving item number 9, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hear none, the motion passes unanimously. Item number 10 is conduct a work session for fiscal year 2023 budget considerations, including but not limited to the following funds: water and sewer funds and drainage funds. Mr. Rogers.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So we usually start our budget discussion with general fund and things like that. But since tonight we're talking about the water rate study, I thought it'd be a good idea to put this whole thing together so you can see the whole water sewer fund in total with revenues and expenditures. So let's get started. So tonight we're going to talk about water and sewer fund as well as the drainage fund. But before we get too far into fiscal 2023, I kind of wanted to show you how we expect to end fiscal 22. So we budgeted $10,460,000 in revenue with expenditures of $10,614,000. So we actually plan to use this $154,000 in reserves in fiscal 22. Where it looks like that we're going to end the year, and it's still, I mean, the seasonality is what happens here in the water and sewer funds, and I'm just starting summer. But where I'm currently projecting is that we're going to end up with revenue of $10,312,000 and expenditures of $10,014,000. So we would still use some reserves, about $102,000 you see there, comparable to budget, but maybe not quite. So what's the cause of that? Our revenue is expected to increase 9%. I actually only budgeted 6%. But what happened is my budget at this time, I was expecting to end the year 21 about $500,000 higher than where we ended 21. So I was projecting off of a higher number than I should have. Essentially budgeted too much. Okay, said it. So even though revenue is increasing by 9%, we may end up short of budget by 147. On the expenditure side, we should end the year $200,000. Most of that savings comes from our water and sewer master plan. We budgeted $400,000 for that, and the actual contract came in around $250,000. So that's where we have some savings on the expenditure side. Most of it comes from that one line item. So if we end the year as I expect, we will end fiscal 22 with just over $6 million of reserves, unrestricted fund balance. That's 57% of our annually budgeted expenditures. For your budget for fiscal 23, I have revenues of $12,160,000 expenditures of 12,770,000. So the preliminary proposed budget shows a use of reserves in this fund of $610,000, which would bring then reserves down to 5.4 or 42.6% of annually budgeted expenditures. Now, we have adopted a fund balance policy that says that we will try to maintain fund balance of 30% of budgeted expenditures plus 1 year's worth of debt service, particularly in this fund, because it's a self-supported fund. That policy also says essentially our floor, or we shall not go below 25% of budgeted expenditures plus 1 year's of debt service. So where would we end here? I want to show you where we're going to end if that comes true. So the blue lines that you see here, the blue bars, I'm sorry, green or whatever color that is, that's our unrestricted reserve balance. And the blue line that you see there is our minimum reserve requirement at 25%, not 30, which is what we wish to maintain, but it's at 25%. And so you can see that fund balance is falling and our reserve requirement increases to where using that reserve in 2023, I'm essentially at our minimum fund balance level, okay? Keep that in mind as we start talking about revenues and the rest of that discussion. That's what I'm projecting right now. So let's look at the revenue budget for 23. This is revenue by category, and I have the revenue categories over here. In 22, our budget again is 10,460,000, and we should come in a little bit less than that. It's accordingly what I'm projecting. But for fiscal 23, our budget for revenue increases by $1.6 million to 12,160,000. The revenues that you see there, these large increases here, are based upon the rate study that we're going to talk about tonight as well. I'm essentially using those the projected revenue based upon our consultant's rate study. So yes, it is true that the fiscal 23 revenues are increasing by $1.6 million.
And Mike, on that slide, that puts our water revenue right back close to our 2021 budgeted number.
Yeah, that's correct.
So essentially zero growth from 2021 to FY 2023.
What? Well,
And I
so
know there was a miss in there.
yeah, no, so yeah, so
but
this
the budget, it's pretty close.
budget to budget, exactly, absolutely. So what you do see is you see this increase here from 5.7 to 5.9. That's the real growth, if you will. Essentially, my budget number of 6,014,000 was too high, and the same with that 3.8. But so yes, when you compare budget to budget, essentially flat between those two.
And the
Good question.
way we get to the 5.2 is through increased sewer.
Correct.
Correct.
That's correct.
Can I have a quick clarification question?
No, please do.
On the projection there, the increased projection, is that, you said that's based on utilizing the rates that we are proposing?
Correct. That's utilizing the rates that we are proposing.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So two questions to kind of build the building underneath this. We're looking at the top level. There's a foundation that kind of comes up. So when I look at that, one is the actual costs of water versus sewer, right?
Mhm.
And are our revenues reflecting those costs on a pro rata basis per person, right? So are we allocating that? That's one. The other is utilization. So we see a 50% increase, almost all of our increase coming from sewer. Is that really because have we seen an increased utilization over time that would justify? So I just, as you're going forward, I'm
those are
thinking
fantastic
about
questions.
utilization of these two funds or these two things. And also just were they not out, are
I
we just
think
truing things up?
So to answer that question, and Nalisa's here for, as we get to the study, to answer, please clarify if I'm wrong. The quick and dirty fact is we've probably been under collecting sewer revenue based upon, as compared to the cost of having sewer, which is what's exactly you're talking about. And so our water rates have been subsidizing our sewer rates. And which is exactly why you have a utility rate study, to have a professional do that sort of allocation, what's water related, what's sewer related, and do that sort of cost functionality. So you charge appropriately for each utility.
Well, and then tying that so that's the one aspect, and then tying back to John's, have we seen a flat water utilization over the last 2 to 3 years? Or are we seeing an increased utilization of water? So anyway, that's,
Excellent.
okay, thank you.
So again, just finishing up with revenues. In those projections, the water revenue increases 3% over our current year end estimate. And that's very comparable to our 4-year average growth rate of like 4%. So that's about right. That sewer revenue just increases a lot. And that's based upon those rate changes that we're going to talk about tonight. Also, transfers have some things happening there. We're allocating personnel, changing the way personnel is allocated. You'll recall this discussion before. We've had people in the general fund that we chop up their pay into many different buckets. And that's just not transparent. And it causes a lot of heartburn on our side. So what we're changing that is basically putting all of the personnel costs where the person is. For instance, all of finance costs is in finance. Hey, imagine that. But then the other funds pay for that not through personnel, but through transfers in and out between funds. The net effect is exactly the same. It's just much more transparent and do it the way we're going to change. So last thing on revenues. This is kind of a chart that showed you from 2016 to 2023. And you can see we have not can't see from here necessarily, but we have not raised utility rates since 2018. So where you see this kind of flat here, and in fact, the little bit of growth that you see there, that's just growth from customers coming in. We have more and more people coming into our town, and that's where you're seeing that. Obviously, the large increase you see for 2023 is rate driven in the most cases and growth, but that's where that comes from. So I did say, and I readily admit, revenues are going up for fiscal 23, but so are expenditures. Okay. So what I want to show you here is it's kind of a breakdown of our expenditures. Personnel costs are $1.9 million, as is debt service. And that's about 15% of our expenditure budget for those items. Water purchases at $2.3 million is about 19%. And the biggest component is transfers to other funds. This transfers to other funds mainly is cash funding of capital projects. So we're moving money from the water and sewer fund into the water and sewer capital project fund to cash fund projects. So when you look at this then kind of on a category basis, again, these are the categories of expenditures that we have. Again, I have a fiscal 22 budget of 10.6 million. It looks like we're coming in probably at 10.4. But when you compare to fiscal 23 goes up on a budget to budget basis by over $2.1 million in costs. Okay. So where are those big things? A large chunk of that is $417,000 is debt service. That's our debt service for bonds that we have issued. Water purchases increases $857,000. That's debt service that man over there issued and has coming. That's why you're still here. Thank you very much.
So this includes the 120 you just spoke about?
That's correct.
Okay.
And then finally transfers. So this is just these two items alone, guys, is $1.2 million increase in our expenditure budget for fiscal 23. Just those two items alone. We also have this $1.3 million there for transfers. That's moving money again into capital projects. So I'll get into those a little bit.
Hey, Mike, just a quick question.
Yes, sir.
When we financed the water tower and the other projects, $7 million.
Yep.
And there was a time that we were going to try to pay for that out of pocket.
Correct.
By adjusting funds to and from. Was any of those dollars for those dedicated to those projects from the cash standpoint coming from somewhere other than water and sewer?
For those projects, no, it was all water and sewer.
Okay.
And so the way that, and here, I'll get to that. So the plan was, remember, we decided, let's go ahead because the timing was right, especially now. Boy, was that a good decision? Let's issue the bonds now and then save that cash for future projects to lower our borrowing costs for future projects. That's the wastewater treatment project that we're talking about, that we're going to try to cash fund as much of that as we can. And that's part of that large
I
transfer. that
recall
you
we're
see.
going to adjust 1.9 million, I thought, and then, fund the 4.4 and come up with some others.
Correct.
But,
That's still on the radar.
Alright.
So payroll costs going down is kind of unnatural. Again, that's because we had a significant amount of costs being reported here that really weren't utility personnel. Consulting expenses go down. Again, remember, it's the master plans where we have a lot of savings there. In 2022, we issued that $6.3 million for the elevated storage tank and that 6th Avenue water line. That's that 417,000 you see there in the increase, essentially that, in city debt service. I mentioned already that the cost there for water, where we have this coded as water purchases, an $857,000 increase. So if you just do the math, why is that so large? Between those three projects that we've been talking about, city manager mentioned in his presentation, there are over $30 million. Our share of costs is over $30 million in water projects. And they just so happen to be all hitting at the same time for debt service. 2020, 2022. And so the reason that our costs have to increase is due to that anticipated debt service on all of these big, huge, amazing projects that we have going on here. Capital outlay, $200,000 for water tap materials. That really doesn't change that much. But transfers I want to mention because this is fairly significant. Actually, it's the biggest category you have. We are going to, in 23, transfer $2.5 million for these projects that you see here. Okay, two of those are this Continental Lift Station offload and that West Avenue Egg sewer replacement. In our 5-year CIP, those are cash funded projects. But what I'm doing in fiscal 23, because I keep telling you, hey, I'm going to need to move this money over from the operating to reduce the fund balance and all that sort of stuff to pay for the treatment plant. I'm actually doing that exercise in fiscal 23. So this $1.5 million is what lowers our reserves down to that minimum balance. Now, we already have $1 million. That's an $8 million project or so. We already have $1 million that we've set aside for that project. This is another $1.5 million. I've got about $1 million, a little over that in unallocated money in our capital project fund. So I'm eating away at the balance that we will have to issue debt in 23. We'll still have to issue debt in 23 because I don't have the difference. Plus, we have another $3 million project scheduled for 23 that's not this one. So our total bond issuance in the CIP is like 13 million. With all of this cash funding, I'm trying to get that below 10, especially. We have some benefits for going below 10, but closer to 9.
So you'll need what, 3 to 5 million to get the treatment plant when it would come?
Something like that. Yes. Correct. So the other things in your this is the big stuff. This is cash funded capital projects. These are the other things that make up your transfer line. That 599 again was reported up in personnel that now kind of goes down to transfers, and that money will go to the general fund. Franchise fees, capital equipment replacement, we're still doing that, and $275,000 for water meter replacement that we're setting aside each year on a go-forward basis. The debt that you're going to have in 23 is this. We have just over $20 million worth of debt. We did have the 2002 issuance matures in fiscal 22, so that goes away for 23. But it got backfilled, shuffled around with that issuance there, the way that debt was structured, that debt payment. So one rolls off, but this one, 2016, increased by an equal amount to where it's all flat. So where we're really seeing the increase is still that 2022 debt service. That's all new. What that looks like long-term, our debt service payments kind of will be around $2 million until that 2008 debt issuance matures. Then it kind of will fly around here, around that number until 2036 when you have another maturity. That's the water and sewer fund. So let me move on to drainage. I'll be
Did
quick
that
with this
debt
one.
Service include the water treatment?
This debt service does not include the water treatment plant. This is what we know now. This is what we have today. So
So and maybe we need to talk about this later too. Just tell me, hey, let's talk about that later. So one of the things you're talking about is there's a lot of things that we're doing. We're incurring debt to pay for things that we already own that we weren't maintaining because they have an end of life. We don't go out and fix it a little bit all the time with these kind of things. We go out and we replace it. So a lot of times you accrue, there's technical debt that accrues. Like I'm gonna have to buy a car in 5 years. So we're gonna put money aside. So when it's time to buy a car, we're doing that. And so the reason I'm asking that is there's been a lot of funding for these types, water, sewer, coming from our friends at the EDC. And they're paying for that, but we're not accruing for having to buy that car when it breaks. So my question is, what are we doing system-wide to not just plan for debt, but to actually potentially have an eye on accruing, or at least having a line of sight of we're gonna need these kind of expenses in whatever the lives are, 30 years, 50 years, whatever those are. Are we modeling anything like that to?
not kind of like an equipment replacement fund
Yeah,
almost.
well, it's our system's getting bigger. It's great, but it's like, Uncle Fester's the one paying for it.
Right.
And we're gonna have to repair it. They're not anyway, so.
Right.
sorry.
The answer is no, directly.
Okay.
However, remember too, we have the 5-year CIP now, which we didn't have before.
Yep.
And that's a formal document that you guys adopt. So that keeps things on the radar at least 5 years out.
Yeah.
But that's not going to get you to that $10 million project, certainly.
Okay.
But yes, we are kind of, and I work all of that into the assumptions as we
It
go
would be
forward.
good to make sure as we do these rate studies, that we factor that in, because there's debt service going into these things that are not captured by our actual expenses because it was paid for by another fund.
Yeah.
Where
No,
if we're
that is
paying
true.
for it, we factor it in.
Yeah.
But if we're not paying for it, it just like
It's invisible.
it, but it's not, yeah.
You're correct.
Okay.
You're correct. I'll cover drainage very quickly. Small fund, a very important fund, but dollar wise compared to the utility fund. So we had revenue for fiscal 22, which is where I expect to end. So we anticipated $7,220 increase to reserves. We'll probably increase that closer to 25. Why is that? Again, revenue's growing, but I overshot the runway on the budget at this time of year. But we do have some expenditure savings. Fund balance wise, we're going to probably end this year with 342. I have a balanced budget at 582 for fiscal 23. Revenues and expenditures are equal, which would leave the same amount of reserves at the end of 23. Not a whole lot of change there, only $1,700 in total, so I won't spend too much time belaboring that point. But we aren't planning on changing the drainage fee. It's still $5 and has been that way for quite some time. It increases because of customers that come into town. So here's your long-term growth, if you will, trend. You can see this growth rate from drainage fee revenue. On the expenditure side, the budget would be going from 573 to 582. And this is a really good example of where to show you how this $70,000 that used to be up there is moving down to that line right there. It's just real easy to see it out of this fund. So we are in 23, we have budgeted the replacement of flood warning devices at Roy Reynolds and the I-14 service road. That's a good thing. Capital outlay goes down because we purchased a zero turn mower in 22 that we're not going to purchase in 23. Debt service here, again, is very stable until that debt matures in 2028. So in summary, yes, I'm aware that water revenues are going up significantly as some of the rates that we're going to talk about. But the other side of that we can't lose sight of are the costs that revenue has to recover, has to cover. And that's really the big picture on the utility side. We still are going to be doing this very large transfer into capital project funds, which is the direction of council. And then again, no increase in drainage rates. That is a 22-minute presentation on the water and sewer and drainage fund budgets for fiscal 23. The way this will work is we'll take your comments or whatever you give us tonight. We'll work those into the proposed budget that will come back your way in August. Any questions or comments, or move on to the next item?
I have a quick clarifying question for myself. We talked about the reserve level being 30%.
Yes, ma'am.
Ideally.
Ideally.
And the projections you presented us by 2023, you said you're drawing us down to about that level based upon what you just presented. Is
Correct.
that right? Okay.
In fact, it's
Thank you.
actually less than 30. It's like 26. But I'm willing to push that a little bit because I'm hoping that we'll have a really dry summer and people will use a lot of water and the numbers will be a little better than what I say.
Okay.
I
Thank you.
don't want the summer to be quite as dry as it is right now.
Yeah, well, dry. Yeah.
I know that we've talked about this last year and the year before about the drainage fees with all the increased in construction in the city and all that. You showed a balanced budget in the drainage fee. Is there any pressure on that to increase those rates? Because I think I recall we were considerably lower than most of our peer group.
We are, I believe, the lowest in the area. I haven't looked at that, to be honest with you, with the amount of stuff we have going on with the other side. We could certainly take that in as we're going to bring back the fee schedule here in the future. And that's certainly the time that we could decide that.
We can certainly show you comparisons of other cities,
Right.
but recognizing what we're facing on water and sewer.
No, I'm not looking to try to find somewhere to raise rates. I just want to make sure that we can
There's
cover
certainly
what we need
always
to cover.
drainage projects that we could do, but I
Yeah.
think the focus really has to be on the water and sewer rates and get them right as we move forward into the next planning period.
That's great. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Mike, I appreciate your accessibility and help with some of these questions that I've had, but a couple of comments. And I'm concerned about the rate increases that were proposed, especially for sewer. And part of that's our own demise because we haven't raised rates and had the foresight to say, hey, we've got some pretty big debt issues coming up and let's try to ease into that. But the other thing I think we've also missed are new service fees, transfer fees, taps and connections. And I think we're way behind there. And if there is some way to review that and get us caught up with our neighbors, that may sure help us not to have to raise sewer rates so much. I just really think we need to be proactive and get after that and say, come back and say,
Our in-house process right now is looking at all those rates. In fact, Amy sent a note today reminding department heads that those are due in another week or two. And then, as Mike said, we'll be bringing the rate structure back to the council as part of the budget adoption. So we're
and
gonna
all
work
those
really
numbers
hard.
have been absolutely flat since 2019. I mean, zero increase. We're just been charging the same thing over and over and over.
You're correct.
With maybe a little more or a little less, but not, I mean, we just missed it. And so any other way we could maybe put a little bit of the expense on new people coming to and not tax existing homeowners so much, I think sure makes a lot of sense. And I'm here to represent a taxpayer and fight for them. And so that's really important to me.
Agreed.
Thank you.
And no further questions. We'll move on.
No action on that tonight, so we move on to consider a resolution endorsing a 5-year water and wastewater rate structure that is designed to provide financial stability for the water and sewer fund. Mr. Rogers again.
Okay. That was so much fun. Let's do it again. So we met at our last meeting to talk about our structure. So we hired Nalisa Hedden, young lady sitting there, who gave the presentation last time about her recommendations for a rate structure. So council provided some fantastic feedback. And so what we did is we asked Nalisa to go back and kind of modify some of her assumptions. One of those was, we know the jail is coming soon. We kind of put 2024 in there. So shouldn't we raise consumption for an expanded jail? And so we did that. Nalisa added 1,500,000 gallons per month for the jail expansion starting in 2024. We also talked about some apartment complexes that we probably will see in this 5-year timeframe. I just kind of put a 2024 and guessed a 2026. A typical apartment complex is 600,000 gallons a month. And so we added 600,000 gallons per month beginning in 2024. And again, another 600,000 beginning in 2026 for 2 apartment complexes. And then we figured, okay, maybe we might have a couple of new schools, elementary schools in particular. So we added 2 schools to the rate assumptions. So what this does by adding all of that consumption, that along with consumption is increased revenue, right? And that increased revenue from this consumption has downward pressure on the rates, much like a property tax rate, right? So that was a good thing. However, 2 days after we met, Mr. Garrett called and said, hey guys, we're planning on doing this debt issuance for the backup power that we council just approved tonight. That is a $12 million project, of which we have about $1.5 million of that, plus interest. So we had to add to the study another 120,000 of expenses, which offsets a lot of the revenue growth gain that we were getting from the new consumption. But the rates now reflect all of these things. The recommendations reflects all of these things. So revisiting that was a good decision. So what are we looking at? The key is the utility is a self-supporting fund. And so it has to cover utility rates to cover all of its costs. As we're developing, using this study, we have to be hesitant in looking at the past because we're not really talking as much about that. There's certainly an impact of that. What we have to do is we're looking forward for the next 5 years. And what we kind of know now or expect to happen within that 5-year time frame. And we have to make sure that we cover our operating expenses, all of these capital projects that we're funding with cash and debt. And then we have to consider inflation. Things that we might have that might happen within the next 5 years. So as we've been talking about, there are some major projects that are causing costs to go up. One is that transmission system upgrade that was done in 2020. BCWCID has already issued debt for that, and we're already making payments on that. There's then the $22 million our share of that treatment capacity increase. That's going to raise our cost by about $1 million. That bond that is currently hasn't been issued yet. It's expected to be issued in 22 in the coming months, with payments starting in 23. And then that backup power project. Again, as I said before, this is $30 million worth of projects for our water system. On top of that, in the spring, I believe, of 2023, they're gonna start bidding on the Temple Belton wastewater treatment plant. Again, the total of that particular project is around $7.5 million, and I'm currently, as you saw in the budget, trying to set aside funding to reduce the amount that we have to issue. But with the other projects that we have, there's a $3 million Mitchell Branch sewer upsize. Another $3 million project to go in there. I'm hoping to get our bond issuance down to $9 million. Doing so, though, would still increase around $660,000 in costs. These items that you're seeing there are really what's driving the rates that we're going to show you. Primarily, the big driver. So then let's look at the revenue requirement for water. So essentially what you're looking at here, this is the revenue requirement is kind of as it says, it's the amount of revenue that you need to get from your rates. And so really the mirror to this, and you can't lose sight of all of this, is the mirror to all of this revenue requirement is our expenditure budget, because that's what we're trying to cover. That's what creates the revenue requirements. So we expect to, we would go from like a $5.5 million revenue requirement in 2023 to 6.4 here in 24. Because all of that debt service, I might have 1 year or or a partial year worth of payments for all of that BCWCID debt in 23, and now I'll have a full year in 2024. And the way that I've seen a structure, a preliminary structure, is that it even increases in total payment for like 2 or 3 years and then levels out after that. So we'll have some escalating costs from those water projects. Then we have like in 2026 or so, 2025 or 6, we'll have about another $3.9 million of debt currently scheduled. I may not issue debt for that when we get to it, but that's what's planned on our CIP now for some of our a few other projects that we have. I believe that one, Loop 121 relocation phase 2, is what makes up a lot of that debt service. So yes, we have a growing revenue requirement over the next 5 years. Utility wastewater is pretty much the same. Again, this 23 is elevated because of the debt service that we have for our project, the wastewater treatment plant. And what you see, the reason this kind of goes ups and downs there is related to the amount of cash funded capital projects that we currently have in our CIP. So I think, so this goes down because I had in 24, because I had in 23, I'm cash funding like $1 million of those 2 projects. And I think in 24, it's only like 400,000 in cash funded capital projects. So that's why you see that sway a little bit. But in the end, there's just $1 million increase here in the wastewater requirement over the 5-year term. So what we're offering tonight to council are we're talking rate structure. And so we gave you some options to look at for how you want to charge your customers. It's completely a council policy decision. Any of these options are going to bring in exactly the same amount of revenue. So water base rates we'll start with, and there's 3 options there. We can, 2 of those charged by meter size. And I'll show you that in a little more detail shortly. And then the third option, option 3, instead of charging by meter size, we charge everybody the same amount of charge for everybody, regardless of meter size. You also have 2 options on your water volumetric rate. That is, we can have 2 classes of customers, a domestic and a sprinkler customer, or we can have just a single customer class and everybody pays the same rate. So let me show you those. So base fees by meter size. So these are the sizes of meters, and we don't have all of those, but that's the standard size of meters that you have there. And this is the count for each of those size of meters. So we have currently 7,732 5/8" meters. We only have 3 8" meters. And because we currently today do not charge by meter size, you can see here that $17 is what everybody pays today for a base fee. And 2,000 gallons are included with this base fee. That's what we currently do. So what happens is for 2023, the recommended rate would be a $3.32 increase to the base rate from $17 to $20.32 for 7,700 customers with a 5/8" meter. Okay. Just to note, we have, because it is option 2, we have just 1 3/4" meter right now. So then that rolls into this option 2. In option 2, it's the same as option 1. We just combine these guys right here into one group. We could do it that way, or we could do it that way. Okay. So what I want you to notice is under option 1 and option, yes, sir. I see a question.
Yeah, so the question is, so because they have a larger meter, they have access to pump more water.
Correct.
Right. But they're still being paid per gallon. No matter how much they can pump, they're just paying, they just.
Correct.
So it's like 5 houses in a row saying, hey, we're just going to use the same meter for these 5 houses instead of.
Right.
And I understand that. But the question I have is, then do you get, like, if I had 5 individual meters versus 1 meter that can serve 5, does your minimum go up? So like
no,
right
it's
now you
per
get
meter.
2,000. Yeah, but see, then it's not consistent. We're paying them more, but they only get, it's like, well, it doesn't matter. I only get, but if Anyway.
Yeah.
That's,
Understand?
yeah.
So
I would think that, hey, if I'm gonna be paying $200 a month as basically a minimum, then I should get a minimum set of water to go with that.
Yes, you do. Everybody
You
gets
get double, you get
2,000 gallons for this, each of these. There's no variance in
Yeah.
that. It's
You end
just-
up paying twice. You pay for that base level twice, where nobody else does.
Not sure I follow. You're paying for the base twice.
So what happens is if you and I combine our meters.
Oh, yeah, I see
We
what
get
you're saying.
4,000, right? But we
Right.
don't get 4,000 because we combined our meters. We only get 2,000. Now I got to pay 2,000 again.
You're
Right, instead of combining them, because we're combining them on the rate, on the flow rate, but we're not equating anyway.
Yeah.
Just-
I don't know how much of that happens, but I agree with
Okay.
you. I see.
Okay.
The one thing I forgot to mention here, and it is important, and you just mentioned it actually. This that you see by meter size, a base charge by meter size is essentially industry standard. Most cities, many cities, okay, I'll say many, charge for this reason, charge like this, because essentially, just as you pointed out, a guy with an 8-inch meter or say a 12-inch meter has the ability to pull water, much more water for your system. And there's a much more of a demand of capacity and oversized lines and everything else for these larger meters than there are from the smaller meters. And not only that, don't forget, one day we have to replace these 8, 10, and 12-inch meters, and they're much costlier than a 5/8 meter. So if the way it's structured now, if you just look at that $17 column, if I'm a guy, and let's kind of play that you're talking about, if I'm a guy that can get by completely, I can live with a 2-inch meter, right? I'm fine with that. But instead, because I'm getting my water, I put in an 8-inch meter because I want my water. Under one charge, regardless of size, there is no disincentive for someone to do that because I'm paying $17, no matter if whatever it is. So this type of structure acknowledges the fact that those larger meters put more demand on your system.
So for those larger entities that would need larger meters, how many of those are feeding a fire suppression system that's not used?
I couldn't answer that question.
No, I'm just curious. I don't know, because if you have if you have a fire suppression system and you need a larger meter for the event that it might, but they're not using it, it's only in an emergency. It's
Right.
not like we're not, it's not Niagara water that we're
Yeah.
pumping out and putting stuff in plastic bottles. I think that would be important to know, is were they required by the city to get a large meter for their sprinkler system, or are they using it because they want to get their water when they want to get it?
Yeah, that's a good question.
'Cause
I don't have
it
an answer. for that.
Potentially would then put a safety tax.
Right.
On certain businesses.
Understand. That's,
Mike, I'm kind of amazed that,
Oh,
go ahead.
sorry.
we might have an answer to that question.
Water is not metered. It comes,
It's not metered.
it's
Okay.
not metered.
Okay.
Yeah, it's after the meter. It's comes straight off your water supply line from your hydrant. So there's no meter that could
Gotcha.
possibly reduce the amount of water.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. That's, I'm sorry.
Question, Mike,
I learned something.
go ahead.
Now, I'm just amazed that, and we've talked about this and looked at it, but current rate of, or base fee is $17. And for, 7,700 of our clients, we're going to $20.32, 20% increase. And we're picking up all those additional fees for other meters that our revenue, forecast revenue is like 70,000 less than we budgeted last year. How with this increased, it looks to me like we have quite a bit of additional revenue, but that doesn't show up on our 2023 budget.
I am using for the revenue figures, the calculated revenue off of our consultant study. Again, I think you're really seeing is when revenues don't go up, on the wastewater or the water side, like they do on the wastewater side, I think is a factor of we're not charging the right way for the right things. If I'm
But
not-
2023, we're changing all that and we're charging a whole nother way.
Let me address, I think this may help on the budget.
Revenue side. So the numbers that Mike has in his budget for revenues are based off of the rate study. When we look at the rate study, we do what we call normalizing water use. So we look at a historical period of time, back at least 5 years, and we look at what the average customer uses per month. And we look at it over 5 years because what happens with water demand is we go up and down depending on the weather. So this year we've had fairly dry and not a lot of rain and really hot. So guess what? Our revenues are up. But next year, if it rains, guess what? Our revenues are down. So we look at it in a normalized period. We don't want to look at a wet year. We don't want to look at a dry year. So we go back in history and we want to shoot for the middle. When we shoot for the middle in those years like this year, where we're selling water like there's no tomorrow because it's really hot and really dry, our revenues are going to be up. Next year or 3 years from now or whenever, our revenues can take a nosedive because it rained all spring long. And so what happens when we look at it on a normalized basis is on the years like this year where you may over recover, you stick that aside, it sits in your fund balance to cover you on those years where we undersell.
And there's a 20% swing for the base rate.
Well, so your base rate, a couple things, your average customer is only using around 5,000 gallons, like 5,400. 2,000 gallons of that is included in the base fee. And so when we do that, a huge portion of your water sales are already in that base fee. So we're not getting extra water revenues from the volumetric fee. The other thing we have to keep in mind when we start looking at growth, we've talked about your community is growing. What we do find typically is new development, apples to apples, same house size to same house size. Typically, a new development house is going to use less water than an old one. All those great efficient water saving fixtures and sprinkler systems on timers and all of those great things, we see that reduce. The third factor that when we talk about growth coming in is we can't look at the blanket revenue number because that blanket revenue number includes a huge percentage of commercial. We did add some commercial in, but it's not going to grow at the same percentage as your residential growth because, for example, one of your biggest customers is the city of Belton. Probably not going to increase your parks and recreations. You're not going to see other large users increase. You may get new large users, but they're not going to increase existing ones. So those are all several factors. And we go back and we look at it and shake it as much as we can. With also, though, this last factor, which is looking at it conservatively. If you recall, Mike showed this great chart previously of your water revenues for the last like 5 years, haven't changed much, but your customer growth has certainly changed quite a bit, but we didn't see a linear change. We didn't see an apples to apples there for the factors, because of the factors I just talked through. And so that's why we have to dig into that data and go down to the consumption per connection level, because the revenues don't give us a clear picture. The customer count doesn't give us a clear picture. So
that's under tying to his, that's the underlying curiosity is we need those volumetric rates to understand that times the dollars per gallon gets us this total, and that's hidden below the surface. We're just looking at the top revenue,
Yes,
and
that's
we're
hard
looking
to-
at a
that's
rate,
right.
but it's hard for us without having a nice little graph to say, well, here's how much revenue we're getting from the base meter fee, and this is how much we're getting for actually selling the water.
Sure.
Right. And then comparing that to our cost to see, are they going up at similar rates? Because what we're doing is we're, from a policy standpoint, looking at an incomplete picture. Even here, we're looking at an incomplete picture.
Isn't it a reasonable assumption that a larger meter will use more water?
Yes.
If that is true, why do we care about how we build the size of the meter when if volumes rise, let's say we've got a 2,000 and then a 5,000 usage. Well, let's say somebody wants to have an 8-inch meter, and so they're going to use 15,000. Don't our rates rise with higher consumption?
I
And
think
if so,
it's-
why,
it's
my
a-
question is, why do we care about the meter size when in fact we get higher consumption rates with larger meters?
Okay, sure.
I'm
So that's a
not, I'm
great-
not seeing
I got
that.
that. So that's a great question. So the rate is the same regardless if you use 1,000 gallons or 1,000,000 gallons. The volumetric rate is the same. You would certainly bring in more revenue from a larger meter because it's using much more water than one of these 5/8-inch meters. But we don't have tiered rates, which I think is what you're referring to, where the first 5,000 gallons is at a lower rate and the second 5,000 gallons is at a higher rate and the 10,000 gallons from 10 to 25 is at the highest rate. We did not incorporate those into this study. Well, we did in the study, but it didn't make enough difference to charge, to
So
change that. one.
so is it worth our time? Is it worth the
is.
effort to look at
Yeah, that's one of the options. I'm
the
gonna show.
size of the meter? I mean, it just.
Dan, the big thing is it's just like bandwidth on the internet. If you want to get faster, you have to pay more, because what happens is that you basically have to reserve that capacity, whether you use it or not.
Right.
We have to be able to reserve that flow rate because of these meters. And so since you're reserving more, maybe you're not using it, just like my bandwidth, I pay a little bit more, but I use it like only 10% of the day. But when I use it, boy, I want to use it. I want to download that. It's the same thing with water flow as internet
right.
traffic.
That's
It's the
correct.
same thing.
And that's a great analogy. And essentially what's happening is if I put in that 8-inch meter, that meter has the capacity to take copious amounts of water. And the second that meter gets put in the ground, by law, the city of Belton has to put in a water line and storage capacity, and BCWCID needs to have to put in all of the treatment capacity to provide them service, even if they never turn on the faucet. By law, you had to take on all that debt. The majority of the fee for the larger customers, basically there's two parts of this base charge. One part of it is reading the meter. It's the same for every customer. It doesn't matter how big your meter is. It's the same couple dollars a month to read your meter and send you a bill and have customer service take care of you. The other piece of it is your debt. That's the piece that gets bigger and bigger because you had to put bigger and bigger infrastructure in place to serve those customers. And so that's the two pieces, and that's why we care so much. To address the question as far as how many gallons are included in the base charge, that comes back to, again, we're recovering debt in this base charge. And so that gallonage that's included, that's honestly a give me. And it's just the city of Belton being nice people, because we're only recovering your customer service charge and your debt in this base charge. So what you pay to, I keep pointing to Ricky, who already left, but what you pay to them, the city of Belton, that's rolled up in the volumetric rate, and everybody pays that. That 2,000 gallons that you're giving away for free, it's just being nice to give the customer some sort of cushion.
Yeah, and that gets back to the, she mentioned debt. The other thing, I think the number was 60% of the debt service load expenditure growth over this time frame is we're putting in this base fee. So why would we do that? Because this is stable. Regardless if it's wet or dry, you'll recover your base fee revenue. And that's good because that debt service doesn't vary with weather either.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons why I kind of put that in there. So I'm going to show you some other options. This is new. We are not currently doing this.
I have a question real quick.
Yes, sir, please.
I don't think John's question got fully answered. And if this is by the month, I'm going to take this step by step, correct? This is per month. Base
Per month.
charge. It's the same 2,000 gallons, no matter what, correct? So if you do that math and you multiply every meter times that increase, and then you multiply by 12, I'm getting $685,000 extra. As John was saying, there's only 80,000 extra in revenue listed. So where's the other
Well, okay, so-
600,000 in revenue?
What you're looking, if you're comparing it to the revenue requirement, we are probably going to bring it, revenue requirement was based upon the budget that was built in. We may actually over collect in revenue over that minimum revenue requirement. But what happens there is that revenue rolls into reserves, and then we use that to cash fund capital projects at a later day. If that answers your question.
But if this is the recommended option, what you use in your revenue, why wouldn't that revenue be reflected if that increase is 685?
Well, it is in the revenue that we have budgeted. I just don't know if it's as visible and as easy, quite as easy as that math that you're doing.
The revenue that you're projecting from this particular option is reflected in.
Well, let me say yes.
Okay.
In fact, every option I'm showing you brings in the same amount of revenue,
Right.
regardless of option. It's just how do you charge it
And
to
who,
customers?
right?
Correct. And who? So this is where I'm going. I'm going to give you another option, right? I said, we're currently doing this right here. That's what we're doing. I want you to keep in mind that number right there, that $3.32. Okay.
Which is 23,100 a month, just times 12. So it's a big number that I
Yes.
don't know where it's going.
Yes, that's correct. Okay. So that's option 2, which essentially is the same thing there. If you don't want to do base charges by meter size, we can do it this way. And that is every customer, all 8,700 customers would pay $22.14 as opposed to 7,700 customers paying $20.32. And so part of the reason, another advantage, if you will, is by doing a base charge by meter size, is you're able to keep the majority of your customers as low a bill as you can give them by having this base fee done this way. So essentially what I'm showing you is 7,700 customers at $20.32, a $3.32 increase, or as an option, you could do, every customer would get a $5.14 volume base charge, this is exactly what we do today. And this is the easiest thing for anybody to understand. And it's easy for our system to take care of. If you want to do it, I'm all in, fine. It's not industry standard, and it does not disincentivize people oversizing their meters just because. Right?
Good answer.
It means that the little guys are covering the cost for the big guys.
Yeah.
That's what it means.
Take care of the separate meter.
Yeah.
Correct. And we're about to do just that. So this is what we do today. And if you want to, but because again, everything we're doing tonight, everything I'm showing you is bringing in the exact same amount of dollars. It's just how you squeeze the balloon. If I'm blowing it on this end, it's getting bigger on that end, right? So this is option 3 of a base rate. So moving on to volumetrics.
Can I ask?
Yes, sir.
This is maybe a dumb question, but trying to think back to some time back. We used to have a certain rate for the first X number of gallons. And then when we got past that, the rate went up for the next.
That's tiered
1,000
rates.
gallons.
Correct.
It appeared to me that the system worked pretty good. And I think you mentioned that. You said that really didn't make much difference based on your study. Is that correct?
Yeah, when we did ask Nelisa to play with that. And when we did the various tiers, and you did remember, we're trying to get to the same number. And so when you did the various tiers, it didn't make that much difference. These rates did not sway significantly enough really to justify all of the extra complications of a tiered rate structure. The other side, I mean, usually when you want to do that, you are promoting conservation, because you're telling the guy that's putting $30,000 gallons of water on his yard. You say, hey guy, you do that, you need to not do that. So we're going to really charge you premium rates for that 25 to 30,000 gallon number, whatever. But we just didn't do that. Didn't justify that.
So, yeah, and I think Daniel was talking about, I just put all that in a spreadsheet, right? So I just said, okay, let's put all of it in a spreadsheet. So right now, our monthly bill based on those numbers at 17 a month is $148,869 a month. The future, using your new rates of 2032 for the base meter and then going all the way down, ends up being $230,000, 71 and 94 cents, because we've got pennies in there instead of just rounding it up, which means that we would be collecting $81,202.94 a month. Times 12 months is $974,435.28 in new revenue just on meters if we did nothing.
And that's for the first 2,000 gallons, no matter what, no questions asked.
That's just the meters. That's not anything else. So, and I think that's
in the
where
budget, actually, that exact figure.
970.
No, but I mean, there's no increase. We're down from 2023.
Well, you're
on
down
revenue
from
line.
budget. You're not down from actual. Or we're actually increasing revenues from actual. I mean,
But it's not even where.
I don't know how to answer your question other than we hired her to do this.
Okay.
Well,
And
just to
I mean, it
clarify,
is-
that you're projected on your, back in your budget fund for the fund, you projected revenue in 2023 for 974,640,
Which is that number.
which is what that number.
That spreadsheet.
So that's,
I'm not sure where we're headed here. I think we're getting into too many weeds.
So, yeah, I think the question that it's an incomplete picture. That's the challenge. It's
We will get you, we can get you, it sounds like you want to see the detail behind the increased revenue for the base charge.
Yeah.
And we can get you that. I think we're looking at a little bit of an apples and oranges. We're looking at a budget compared to a rate
Well, and-
study, but
and
we
the
can
thing-
certainly get you that detail.
the thing, and I think the thing that's a challenge is we are saying that we've been probably not charging enough in sewer, so we need to make up. And so we're not going to charge as much in the future for water because we've been overcharging
No,
for
it's
water.
not, that's not how it is at all. Her study takes our budget and says so much of that is sewer
No.
and so much is water. And then now let's build the rates to capture that.
No. Yeah, I understand. It's just, we heard earlier that we have a lot of stuff on sewer.
Right.
Right. But what we're looking at now is a lot more on water. And we're just trying to reconcile two things that seem to be in opposition.
$30 million in water improvements and capital projects.
No. I'm just talking about the other budget to say I'm not making a challenge. I'm just saying why there's confusion. It's not challenging any assumption.
Right.
It's just
I guess-
saying the revenue generated from water seems to be flat year over year. But when we run those numbers, it's $1 million more.
And that was in wastewater.
And the sewer.
Oh, I see what
was
you're, this
2
math that you
million
just did.
over
This
in
is
revenue.
my
And
spreadsheet.
we haven't even got.
Okay, so
It's just incomplete. It's like, it's all the math work that you
Yeah, but-
do and you
okay,
put a little
so-
square on the answer and it's like, I don't understand the answer. Let me see your work.
Yeah.
And we're just all asking it. in
we can
different
certainly
ways.
get you that. I think
Yeah.
where I'm headed though is we're getting to the same place. I could make our base rate $1 instead of $17, but I got to make that up somewhere. So we'll get you the details of how her study takes you from point A to point B.
Yeah.
I don't know if all 195 pages of her study is going to mean
Well,
anything to you.
No,
But-
there's a middle ground, right? There's big base assumptions, not the detailed
Right.
work.
Um,
And it's just big blocks.
Right. Should I go on to the wastewater? I mean, to the sprinkler thing, or do you want to?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so when we looked at this, also the consultant recommended 2 rate classes for volumetric rates. And that's a domestic class and a sprinkler class. Okay. We have in a domestic usage, a domestic meter is primarily water through your home for showers and dishes and, home use. Certainly, there's a lot of folks that irrigate through a domestic meter today. That just happens because we only have 722 sprinkler meters. So the way this kind of looks is you see this difference here in 2023 of domestic versus sprinkler. And that is primarily driven by the fact that under the options that we're proposing for 23, there will be no base rate for sprinkler meters. We've heard complaints from customers and others who have been adamant that in the winter months, when I'm not using my sprinkler meter at all, I should not be paying that $17 base fee that I just showed you a while ago. And you know what? Makes perfect sense. What we're proposing to fix that is eliminating the base fee for sprinklers altogether. So during the winter months, you pay nothing, zero. It's only based upon the volumes that you use. But doing so, again, the game is capturing the same amount of revenue, however you do that.
And I just found your number your number question you had. It's that 722 meters are embedded in those larger meter sizes. And the study assumes they won't pay a base fee. And so some of that differential you're finding on your spreadsheet you're running is because of that issue. This is the total meter count. And it includes the sprinkler meters. If you go to the policy that's proposed here, the sprinkler meters, those 722 get pulled out. So that's part of that math you're looking at, but we will give you a spreadsheet that calculates all that for you.
No, please do. So in the recommended example, so the base fees essentially that you're not recovering from sprinkler customers in effect kind of roll into that volumetric rate. So you're still capturing the same amount of revenue from sprinkler meters. It's just you're doing that in that way.
And I have a little bit of problem with that.
Sure.
To collect the same amount of revenue that we honestly shouldn't have been collecting before, kind of just rubbed me a little wrong.
Yeah.
You know,
Understand.
can we not collect 50% of it or 75% of it? But to just say, okay, we're not going to charge you a $17 monthly fee, but we are going to jack up the rate so that we can collect the same amount of annual revenue from you because that works in our system.
Yeah. Well, and be aware, I mean, if a customer did not use his sprinkler meter, he would not pay
No, I get
that.
it. I understand.
So it is somewhat demand driven, but again, I'm giving you another option. But let's continue to look at this one. So under this idea, no base fee for a sprinkler meter. But a sprinkler meter would pay for every 1,000 gallons. There's no base, there's no 2,000 gallons included. So you would end up, you would charge for every 1,000 gallons you use through a sprinkler meter. So just doing this math for 2023, and I'm just showing it to you. So 10,000 gallons, I just picked 10,000 gallons. A customer who used 10,000 gallons through a sprinkler meter would pay $47.50 for those 10,000 gallons. If we did it the way we always have done it, where you would pay a base fee plus then a lower domestic rate of $3.70 just in 23, then that same person using 10,000 gallons the old way would pay $49.92 instead of $47.50 if we just kept doing it the way we've always done. So that's just information. But if you don't want to do that, again,
I like the change and I think it makes sense.
Again, let me make some room here.
In winter months, they don't pay anything.
In winter months, you would pay zero. Plus, sprinkler meter, you're not paying wastewater on that sprinkler meter either. So I mean, there's plenty of savings to be had by having a sprinkler meter. But here's, again, what I want to show you. If we go with this recommendation, I've got 8,000 customers who do not have a rate increase for volumetric water in 2023. Okay. Now, the option that we currently do today is this. We have one customer class. And if you want to keep that, now I have a 17-cent increase. I mean, they're paying $3.87 as opposed to $3.70. 17 cents more per 1,000 gallons. All customer classes are paying. I mean, everybody's paying that.
So question.
The monthly fee.
So
this is
question-
volumetric.
So on some of your big water users that you mentioned before, when we look at, say, an apartment complex that has all the different individual residences in there, and they have a pool and they have their sprinkler system, do they just go off of one large meter, or do they have different?
Some are probably sub-metered. I know Amanda can help with that. What we did, so we
The reason I'm asking is, are they because
we looked at, so here's the funny thing. we looked at the effect to our apartment complexes, multifamily dwellings. The way we currently build multifamily dwellings, an apartment complex, is based upon the number of units, apartments. So we're treating each of those individual. We don't bill customers that way, but we bill the owner that way. It's so much per unit.
So like
And-
UMHB as well? So
I'm sorry?
the number of.
No, UMH, well, I don't. Come in.
Let me address real quick for you. So an apartment complex, they're going to be incentivized to get that second sprinkler meter, and most of them likely will have it, especially bigger ones, because of the fact that then they don't pay sewer on that. If they have if it's all on one meter, a large apartment complex won't want anything to do with one meter because they're paying to sewer on filling that pool and putting water in their common areas.
And I understand that if we were to charge based on water utilization, but it's my understanding that we don't charge them.
Right,
based on
and that's what we are
utilization, charge them.
changing under our proposal would be to change that to by meter size. So what we're doing, and when we did the math, we took a handful of our apartment complexes and said, oh my God, what's going to happen to these guys? What we actually found was under the method of per meter size and charging them that way, they would pay less than they pay today. Just converting to this new method as opposed to a per unit charge. Now, we're still trying to bring in, similar amount of revenue for the study from multifamily type stuff. But it just worked out. You would actually, most of our apartment complexes would have a limited increase or a slight reduction in the total amount of their bill based upon average consumption.
The challenge we have with all of these, right, is we're changing the rules. So, right, it's a study, so we're going to change the way and so there are unintended consequences. And so you end up, from John's perspective, the average home is going to see an increase where the average apartment complex will not.
Right.
And the average home will affect the average wage earner, where the apartment complex will affect a fund or a corporation. And so when we look at fair, we especially as the ones that vote for us, right? So the ones that are the average home owner, not their average apartment complex, we need to make sure it's just fair.
Sure.
And that there's not, and I'll just, John and me sitting side by side, I don't have to pay extra because I don't have sewer. So I'll get to water my yard and fill my pool with the same as he does on his other. Anyway, so it's just, we're just trying to find and split this baby, right? It's just, because this is a very felt tax.
Right. No, I
Especially in
understand.
hot winters,
So
hot summers like. we're
again, it
doing
gets
right
back, if you want to keep what we're doing today. One, as far as apartments, we don't have an apartment class, commercial customer class, just like we don't have a commercial customer class. There's just simply not as much volume, not enough to really justify the change in rates to have all of those extra classes. Next time we do a study, we can certainly consider all of that and change all of that. But yes, this is a big change from what we're doing today. So if you're more comfortable with these single customer class things, I'm fine with that. Just tell me that's what you want to do, because that's your decision. If we do, just to show you the differences there, if we do by meter size and a sprinkler and domestic class, a customer who had 5,000 gallons of water through a 5-inch meter would pay $31.42 instead of $28.10, a $3.32 increase. If we go through the single rate options, which we've talked about, that customer would pay $33.75, a $5.65 increase for just for 5,000 gallons that they use through the deal. That's the comparison of keeping the two together.
Option 3 has the little guys, like you were describing, who are subsidized. It's not much money, but still, it's subsidizing the bigger users, and that doesn't make any sense to me.
I mean, when you're talking about fair, homeowners need our water to live. Businesses need our water to sell. And I have a hard concept with that about hurting the homeowner or the resident, the taxpayer versus the business, and
Right. Again, we don't have currently a customer class for commercial. We didn't assume that you would want a customer class for commercial.
Wouldn't most of our
Good.
larger meters be, is that a dumb question. I mean,
No.
would some of our larger meters probably be attached to our businesses and we'll
Absolutely.
be
Absolutely.
capturing a larger rate with the,
The majority of the
Meter
larger
size?
meters are going to be commercial customers. So they're going to see a larger increase just because of that base charge that we went through. Most of your average residential customer is going to have that 5/8 inch meter, so they're going to get the $3.32 increase. Everybody else, there may be other homeowners out there with larger meters. They also probably have large lots. But your average homeowner is going to be at that 5/8 inch meter. On the business use size, that's again, and that's why we will definitely get you that math, because you have a lot of things. We've got some revenue going up from the base charge, but then you have some volumetric rate revenue going down and the loss of the sprinkler revenue. So we'll get you all of that math as well. But to answer your question, yes.
So that's water. Let me move on to wastewater, and then I'm not trying to finish the discussion. I'm just moving us along so you can see the whole picture. So we talked about, we only have these two pieces now today. We have a base fee, one base fee for all and one volumetric rate for all today. The recommendation, because when we kind of played with other ways to do this, I mean, you don't charge by meter size anyway for sewer. It's pretty much all one base fee. So we have a large increase here. Keep in mind, remember, this is going to pay for all of that sewer expenses that we have in our budget. Okay, I have to capture the same amount of revenue. I don't have fund balance now to just go with these rates and say, let's lower them just because. So if I'm very aware that this is a $2.25 increase, but if we ended up saying, okay, let's make this $15 instead of $16.25, just remember that we got to get to $18.51 in 2024, and that's an even bigger jump in 2024. Still, that and those amounts are based upon those projections. So this kind of what you're looking at here is kind of that in between, and it's based upon the timing of those expenses that we have so much stuff hitting in 2023 that we're trying to recover there. So that's the consultant's recommendation. So what would the total bill look like? Basically, again, this is just 5,000 gallons. Our typical usage is 5,000 to 6,000, somewhere in between. Person who uses 5,000 gallons through a 5/8 inch meter would have paid $57.10 in 2022, would now pay $70.17 if we do the by meter size. They would pay a little bit more than that, $72.50, if you decided to do the single rates like we currently do. Again, that's your call, how you want to do that. I'll finish up with this. I kind of looked at some city comparisons. These are for the cities you see here, kind of our surrounding cities. And this is what, if you did your bill on their website kind of a thing, that's what you would pay for 5,000 gallons of water. Again, we're not Copper's Cove, so you can't really compare us necessarily to Copper's Cove. But I did some cities that are surrounding us. I did some cities with similar populations. In 22, we're that. 2023, we would be that. We'd be a little bit more than that if you want to do the single rate options. But even at the single rate options, you can kind of see where we fall in comparison to these cities. We certainly would not be the cheapest. But then again, some of those stuff that we're talking about in costs, a lot of this BCWCID stuff is going to flow back to these cities too. And so they may be raising their rates next year. I don't have a clue. But at some point in time, they may have to. I just wanted, it's just to show comparability.
So to that point, I was going to ask it earlier, but I chose to wait for later. But Temple doesn't use BCWCID. What's their cost versus our cost for doing their own? And my concern is that we're paying somebody else. We're just paying somebody else. There's no real, are they doing it as efficient as Temple is? More efficient?
Temple has a water plant. They
Yeah.
take the water directly out of the river, of course, and
Because we own our own acre feet, right?
right, we own our acre feet.
So we could theoretically
Build a
do our
plant.
own.
build our own plant.
Well, we're doing it.
Yeah.
Well,
We're doing it for
we're paying
somebody
for it.
else and everybody else is on board. So I mean, it's the fairness question. It's like, it'd be good, at this point, the amount of money we're paying for BCWCID, it would be nice to know, just apples to, as much as apples to apples, what does it cost for Temple for their water versus us for our water? Because we share the same river.
Including their amortized real property costs.
There's real costs. Anyway, that's neither here nor there, but I think we're getting to the point now. People will vote with which lot they want to buy. And
folks in Three Creeks would still be paying 1.5 total.
That's correct. They're still paying 1.25.
River Farms.
Right. Thank you. Mike, you showed just a minute ago, show me what the average customer is paying this year per month base rate and what you're saying next year.
Total bill?
Yep.
That one right there. Let me take these off, Mayor.
And you've got the two different options on the 23. Like that 770 is with option 1 and 2, and then the 7250 was with option 3. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
It's up to you how you want to charge that. So what we're looking for tonight is approval of a rate, or I call it an endorsement of a rate structure, which is based upon those options that we mentioned tonight. The resolution has each option separately. So if you wanted to pick one and not the other, however you want to do that, it's up to you. The point is, again, I have a very large increase in expenditures, and I need to recover revenue sufficient to pay that. And it's a matter of in what manner do you want to capture that revenue and from whom? Again, this stuff here is more industry standard, but if you don't want to do it and you want to do the simpler ways, the way we've always done it, at least for since the last study. So we've been doing it at least the last
You're
8
good.
years.
Just hold off right there. But I think, we've missed some revenue from businesses over the years. And when we looked at this 3 or 4 years ago, I said, well, we're really missing out, $17 a month and then just pay for the same water rate as everybody else. But you have tremendous flow capability. So I think option 2 takes care of that. I like that we've combined 5/8 and 3/4. And then I think the thing that we would debate or discuss at a later date or budget time would be the actual rate. And so the concept I'm good with, and the structure of that, knowing that we would set the rate for those at a later date.
Thanks for mentioning that. What you're doing tonight is not setting the rates for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
We're going to bring those back in September of each year, and then we'll compare how did our revenues compare to the study. Are we, blowing the study out of the water, or are we actually under where we needed to be? And we'll do that. The 2023 year is going to be the 23 year. I'm telling you that probably. But as we go forwards, we're going to have to kind of look and we'll compare. But this isn't adopting the rates. This is adopting a rate structure and kind of this is our guidelines for the next 5 years.
I think option 2 allows us to also capture some sort of revenue based upon the size that would maybe help regain, or not recoup, but moving forward, gain an increased rate for businesses. Without the class, if we don't have the class structure or the tiered system, this would be an option for that and keeping that cost down on the homeowner.
Mayor, is it appropriate to make a motion?
It's a work session, right?
And we fixed the sprinkler issue.
So I think what's critical here is we're not questioning you or the motive. We're just questioning. And I know that it can come out emotional, like we're questioning the motive behind going and trying to raise the money. We're not trying to do that. We're just trying to get, in our own way, get our mind around the facts that are important to us and what we feel for our constituents. And we're all bent a little bit differently. So again, don't take these as critical questions. They're just questions to understand the underlying math that's not apparent. And it's just, it takes a little while for us. I mean, you guys have been looking at it for a long time. We're seeing this much. So anyway, you guys have done a good job. You're trying to make the most of it. I think, anyway, I just want to make sure I mention that.
I think that was well said. And Dan, you wanted to make a motion to approve resolution?
And I'm thinking option 2, but I would be tickled if somebody else wanted to. And if there's an option 2 on both water and wastewater, I think that's where we were headed. Is that correct? That would be my motion. And I don't think we do them separately.
Yeah.
We need to vote on 3 different things.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so let's do it this way.
Yeah,
Look
thank you.
behind door number 1, right?
There you go.
So we have this method,
2.
okay? That's option 1. We're talking base fees.
I know. but
We
want
have
2.
that option, which the only difference is this portion right here.
Right.
And then we have that option for base fees.
I
So
move we adopt
better like an
two
option.
base
It's
fees.
option 2.
All in favor?
Option 2.
Second.
Yes, ma'am.
Second.
Okay, we have multiple motions for option 2. All those in favor of option 2, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, option 2 passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you.
Structure and rate to be decided.
Um, So then on your water volumetric rate, you have this option here where we have these 2 customer classes. We're creating an additional customer class called sprinkler. And then in this one here, we have one volumetric class like we've always had. It's that one, or it's this one under both of these
I move we
scenarios.
Adopt option 1, which includes the
Second.
new sprinkler class.
Okay. And in both of those, just to clarify too, yes, there is no base fee for sprinkler regardless.
Got a motion and a second.
Got a motion and a second. All those in favor of that?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
And then last part, really, there is no option here. This is if you just would final, make a motion to approve these rates.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve wastewater rates. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. And we'll modify that resolution
Okay.
to the right way.
And we will discuss rates at future meetings. Also, back to what John said earlier about looking at possible upfront connection fees and things like that, that we can look at that. That might take a little bite out of the hurt that we've talked about in the past. Thank you, Mike. At this time, we'll have a 5-minute recess before we reconvene into executive session.
Thank you, Larry.